What's going on, folks? We are going to be going over the patch notes in this video. Not going to be too heavily involved. Beyond that, I just wanted to give some thoughts on it, how I think it'll shake things up, and maybe bring some much needed balance to some of the more egregious factions that have been dominating the meta lately. So, without further ado, we'll just go ahead and get into it. I've done a once-over, and I know mostly what I want to talk about, but if there's anything that I do miss, I would really love to know in the comments, so please tell me. Because there's no way I'm going to be able to catch everything. A lot of this is campaign-oriented stuff. I went through a good portion of the animations changes. I didn't see anything too significant there, so I probably won't spend a lot of time talking about it. It's mostly going to be the new units and the new multiplayer balance patch that I spent time talking about. There's some other animation stuff I will get into, though. Without further ado, Nangal grenades are going to be a big unit for Cathay, I think. Vampire Coast struggles mightily in the short range in melee focused engagements oftentimes, and they're very much held up by their own bomber variant in that regard. They are very capable of just shredding a front line, and I feel like Cathay is going to benefit greatly from having a very similar unit. Haven't seen the stats on them. I obviously don't know how exactly they're going to play out, but just based on the bomber mob archetype, that alone would be pretty strong, but they're also going to have the single-use stun bomb ability, which is going to debuff units that it hits, which accordingly is going to be a very large area. I'm not sure exactly how that'll work. Probably a temporary imbuement of a blinded type effect would be my guess, which could be very good for Cathay, considering their Jade Warriors are incredibly weak melee units. Don't have very good damage output on their own. That might give Cathay a little bit of an opportunity to trade a little more favorably in the melee fights, as well as the bombs themselves actually doing some fairly significant damage. Excuse me. It says somewhat capable in melee. I don't know what that means, but if they have stats somewhere in like the low 30s on melee attack, melee defense, and weapon strength, they may actually be able to run in once they've used all the grenades up and actually do a reasonable amount of damage, which would be really nice. And another benefit is I'm imagining these guys are going to give Yin Harmony. And since they're already a fairly short-range unit, just by virtue of hand-throwing these grenades they've got, it will probably mean that you've got Harmony up on a lot more of your units than if you're using crossbows and peasant archers. Using both of those units right now can be very difficult to maintain proper spacing, so you're getting Harmony and the full effect of their volleys. It might be a little bit easier to use those units after this patch, considering some of the changes to Fire at Will, which I'll get into a little bit later. But I do think that the Bombers, these Grenadiers, are very likely going to be an incredibly meta unit for Cathay, as long as they're reasonably powerful, and it does sound pretty promising from what I'm seeing here. I'll probably go over them in a little short, maybe, just to talk about them once I've actually got my hands on them. Noblar Flingers were a little unexpected. I wasn't thinking that the Ogre Kingdoms would get another unit, but they do indeed. They've got another Noblar unit for the roster. There's some other changes that have come with all of the Ogre Kingdoms units in this patch. Nothing too crazy, but definitely some of their stronger units have been touched up. I do imagine that Noblar Kingdoms is very much going to be a very meta build for multiplayer. Noblars are very cheap, they're fairly cost-effective, they do a very good job buffering for you, and these little guys with their slings, I imagine they're going to be very similar to a Skaven Slave Sling, which are honestly quite strong. A 200 gold Slinger unit we've seen already on pretty wide roster do some pretty good work for you. I mean, if they get their value back, then you're sitting pretty, and I imagine these guys will be very similarly statted and used force to reckon with. Probably not going to be very capable in melee, probably not even have a lot of damage output on the slings, but they'll just be so numerous and cheap that they can double up on the ogre's ranged advantage that they already enjoy, so it might make the ogres a little bit more annoying to play against, but we'll see how they do and how the balance changes even out the ogre kingdoms. They've been banned for a very long time in domination for a reason. Lots of campaign stuff. I'm not really going to get into it. No offense, it's not really my focus. It does look promising. I did read through it all, or through most of it at least. I am probably going to play a Kislev campaign. I might work on one on stream, just, you know, as funsies. But here we get down to some of the more interesting changes. We get a UI redesign, which is always nice. This, you can see the before and after here. This whole stacking abilities, buffs, debuffs, and resistances and everything is just unreadable. Absolutely horrendous. It's always a nightmare in multiplayer battles to be able to like read what is actually going on with units sometimes, abilities-wise. So now that they are fixing it to set it up the way that one of the mods has for quite a while, yeah, Sudke's mod was set up like this. It'll make it a lot easier to jump into multiplayer battles and be able to tell at a glance what exactly it is that your opponents got, and just improving readability is always really awesome. I do very much appreciate them looking in on something so seemingly trivial, but can honestly be really nice, especially for newer players who may not know all of the abilities and what they do and how they can interact and interplay with all of the various units that are out on the battlefield. Just being able to like see what it is and then quickly hover over it without having to fiddle around with your mouse a whole bunch, trying to like make sure that you're looking at the right thing at the right time, is going to make a huge change that I'm very appreciative of. Complex stat changes. Now, this is not the most clearly defined explanation. I'm going to have to actually play some games to get a good idea for this, but High Elf and Bretonnian Cavalry specifically, they're saying, have gotten a turn speed buff, which is honestly kind of huge. Mobility is very powerful in domination mode, but especially your mobility being able to respond to your orders quickly and efficiently can make or break whether they stay alive and on the field or they just get absolutely obliterated by a missile volley. Obviously, dodging missiles is very much a thing. At very high levels, it is something that is relied upon so that your cavalry can actually get a charge home without just getting absolutely obliterated on the way in. So this is a really nice change for High Elves and Bretonnia, who are pretty reliant on their cavalry. Skeletal Steeds are not going to be getting the buff, I'm guessing. It's still relatively slow at turning. I imagine that they're just very tongue-in-cheek, alluding to the fact that these guys are not getting any kind of change, which is fine. A lot of the skeletal cavalry isn't very useful to begin with. You see Black Knights a little bit on the vampire counts, but you know, skeleton horsemen are a very cheap unit for Tomb Kings. They're probably not too shaken up about the fact that their 400 gold cavalry are going to be a little bit less maneuverable than other more costly variants. They're 400 gold. Like, they just run in and they get into a combat. They either lock something in place that's way more expensive than them, or they, like, value trade into, like, Furies or something, and they don't really need the mobility for that. So, I'm liking this. It's going to be interesting to see how it fully plays out, but very promising at first glance here. Some more campaign and performance stuff, UI fixes, some animation business. There was something in here. Ah, here it is. fixed issues where chariots and other entities were being hit by the same missile projectile multiple times, resulting in excessive damage. We'll see how this plays out, but I have very much noticed it's been an ongoing issue since Warhammer was first released. Oftentimes, chariot hitboxes are a little bit buggy and overstacked. They have multiple hitboxes, and oftentimes some missiles, very specific ones like the Luminarchs and magic missiles, will hit both hitboxes and double the damage that chariots take, which is pretty painful. This might make it a little less brutal to bring chariot characters. I'm not sure all exactly what was bugged, but I have noticed it in a fair number of games, especially like I mentioned with the Luminarch. Luminarch is definitely double hitting things very consistently. So that might make that a little bit less overbearing to go up against at times, because Empire can definitely frustrate people with that kind of a play style in a very negative way. Possible crash when there are too many projectiles slowly sliding, rolling on the ground. I've never experienced this. This is probably a campaign deal. But the other big change here, probably the most important one, period, is fixed issues with ranged units fire at will stance by increasing the number of checks units make to start firing. They will now also prioritize firing over maintaining positional unit cohesion. If you run into any further issues, blah, 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 please report. I'm hoping what this means is that if you stick stuff and fire at will and just stop them, they'll actually start firing at things in their arc, because most of the factions I play don't have a lot of range. I main Khorne. I play a lot of Beastmen. But I've started branching out into playing Kislev and Chaos Dowie. Excuse me, and especially this last patch, I was just so frustrated because I was not understanding how it was that I could stick something and fire at will, and then they would just never open fire. You'd have to give them very precise orders for them to actually open up and do damage. And especially as somebody learning those factions, it made it incredibly frustrating to try and play those factions. So this is probably going to help a lot for people who are getting into multiplayer and domination mode, because a lot of the most popular factions are factions like Empire, Dark Elves, High Elves to some degree, but especially like Empire and Dark Elves, who are very popular amongst newer players, will definitely benefit from this. So like Dark Shards, Free Company Militia, Handgunners, all of these guys should actually be a lot more effective without micromanaging every individual unit, because that gets very overwhelming quickly. It'll help the Chaos Dowie, of course. Any missile unit, really. I'm really happy to see this change. I'm really hoping that it's going to work the way that they're saying it will. And if it's not, I'm hoping that they can at least patch it quickly, because waiting months and months at a time for fixes can be pretty miserable. So we'll move over and we'll get into the actual balance changes, cost reductions, nerfs, buffs, the whole 9 yards. And we'll start off with the Beastmen. Beastmen, I love the Beastmen. They're one of my mains. It's Khorne Beastmen, and I don't know who I would say my third faction is. I'd have to think about that one. I don't really have a settled third. Maybe Lizardmen for my third strongest faction that I play regularly. So I'm very familiar with their units and how they function. And just going through here, Torok's getting a cost reduction is actually kind of awesome. He's like fringe viable, in my opinion, already. His biggest issue is just being really expensive, and getting 100 gold off of him is really nice. It's going to make a big difference for sticking him into armies. Just small cost reductions and also like cost nerfs can make a big difference for army compositions. Just having played multiplayer for a couple of years now, you really notice it after a while. Like, when you're first starting off, you're thinking, how can 100 gold make that big of a difference for the viability of a unit? but really it has less to do with just the pure value of the unit, but also just how the 50 and 25 gold intervals for unit cost work into making zero spin builds and getting the most bang for your buck out of what you're spending on your starting army and reinforcements, especially for domination mode. So I honestly think 100 gold off of Torox, it's not going to make the biggest difference in the world. He's still got all the same weaknesses. But he is, like I said, fringe viable, and I think you will probably see him a little bit just with the fact that he's 100 gold cheaper. Malagor got Hide and Forest removed from him. I mean, I don't know why this is all that important, but I guess it is going to balance him out a little bit on some of the larger maps with bigger forests, because Malagor is quite squishy. I did make a video talking about the Beastman Lords very recently. If you haven't seen it, you should go check it out. Malagor is definitely the most viable Beastman Lord, the one that you'll see in a majority of matchups. He's just so fast. His lore of magic that he uses, which is like a mix between shadows and wilds with Flock of Doom on top of that, is just crazy. I mean, he's got so much potential, but being a squishy lord, and if he gets beat up, and him being able to go hide in forests and just avoid the snipes probably is a little frustrating. So I think maybe just removing this is going to give it a little bit of juice in the arena of your opponent brought Malagor, you were expecting it, you're going for a snipe on him, and you're trying to get rid of his 4,900 HP. And now he can't just disappear into the forest and just vanish from your sight forever, basically, because it's already hard enough to kill him with 121 speed, because he gets the Primal Fury buff to speed as well, which makes him impossible to catch in the air. So if you're spell sniping him, you can probably actually just finish him off once he gets low now, which is going to be really nice, because Beastmen are a very low leadership faction, and if they lose their lord, that's a huge penalty to them. And that's generally how they lose games. It's rare that you're going to be able to clear the Beastmen off the field because they're so fast. They're so fast and good at swarming. Being able to Lord Snipe Malagor is going to make it a lot easier to deal with the Beastmen, potentially, while not just totally nerfing the Beastmen into the ground. Centigors all got cost increases of 50 to 25 gold. Throwing axes only 25, but regular Centigors, Centigors of Tzeentch, Great Weapons, and the Sons of Goros are all 50 gold more expensive, which is honestly a pretty big change. This is going to make it a lot harder to Centigor spam while still being able to bring in a reasonable amount of infantry to hold on to points. I don't think it's going to, change the Beastmen fundamentally. I still think you're going to see just loads of Centigors in most matchups, just because they're still so strong. They're going to still have the perfect vigor from Rowdy and all of the other goodies. But 50 gold is 50 gold. You're going to be able to fit a lot less in, while still keeping a reasonable amount of infantry out on the field at all times. I think this is a step in the right direction, and we'll see how it changes the Beastmen up overall. Other changes, Zangors, Pestigors got slight charge bonus decreases, which I think is pretty fair. These guys hit like a truck on the charge. It's kind of crazy. Infantry are odd with their charge bonus. You might think that 30 charge bonus is nothing, but when you have to consider that these guys have like 120 models in their units, and when they make contact, they are just walloping everything in their path when they make initial contact, which then leads them to up trading significantly over the course of a prolonged fight because they got the early advantage, and now they potentially outnumber their opponent by a pretty substantial margin. And it's just had Beastmen infantry be way too cost effective for a very long time. So I think these charge bonus changes, and for the Corngors, a slight nerf to their weapon strength. I mean, it's only 1 on base and AP. Not that big of a deal, but in conjunction with the charge bonus, nerf, they might be a little bit less likely to just sweep you off the field in the opening moments, because that really is how the Beastmen win games. They just are so ferocious in that initial first contact, and then the fact that they have so much Vanguard deployment and fast units, they can just overwhelm you and knock you off the field, and by the time you're like value trading back against them and ready to push out, oftentimes the game can be a little bit out of reach for you on the ticket department. And I think these cost changes are going to be really nice. I think it's going to put the Beastmen into strong, but not just overwhelmingly ferocious territory. Now, some of their units did get some minor buffs. The Gore Herd did get a cost nerf. They got 25 gold more expensive each. But they got 4 more charge bonus, so these guys are going to be your shock infantry. Gore Herds with shields got a slight charge bonus increase, which is interesting. Same with the Gore Herds Ravager, or the Blackhorns Ravagers, the ROR, and Korok's Man Rippers got some more charge bonus. These are not a very viable unit, in my experience. They've always been a little lackluster as an ROR. Excuse me, Beastmen have plenty of anti-large. Having an anti-large, like, halberd unit on the field for 1,300 gold usually isn't very important for them. I don't think this charge bonus is going to change anything for these guys, but it's nice. It's something. Maybe it makes them a little more viable. I'll have to test it out, like, how much better they perform with the 26 as opposed to 20 charge bonus. Getting into Bretonia. Bretonia has needed milk for a long time. They've been pretty bad. These last couple patches, ever since the Grail Knight nerfs. Was that 2 patches ago? Might have been just this last patch before this most recent one. They've been struggling. They are just a very chaff-heavy faction, and their knights just are not hitting hard enough. So, Knights Errant get a little bit of a melee attack buff. More charge bonus is always nice. Going from 50 to 55, a 10% increase is pretty substantial. It's not crazy, but it's definitely going to help their damage output. And just minor changes like this can get units over breakpoints that they're otherwise not meeting. And push them into viability. So we might see more Knights Errant. And just more knight-heavy builds in general, since the most standard variant got a little bit more powerful without any kind of a cost increase. So they are still very cheap and available in numbers. Royal Pegasus Knights got a mass increase, which is very welcome. Pegasus are kind of hard to use just because they get trapped on the ground really easily. Another additional effect that this mass increase is going to have is it's going to mean that their charges, when they actually impact with units, they're going to bounce things away from them a little bit better, so they're going to be a lot more disruptive, which I think is pretty awesome, personally. It's going to be really nice, and it's affecting all Pegasus in the game, from what I can tell, because I went through and looked at some other ones. Lots of buffs to mass on Pegasus-type units. Green Knight got perfect vigor, and most importantly, a 300 gold cost reduction, which is honestly pretty wild. I mean, this guy, like a lot of combat characters, if there were big single entities on the field, he was already fairly powerful. But going from 1800 to 1500 at base, while providing terror and perfect vigor, so he just never gets tired and is always fighting at max efficiency, I think the Green Knight might become just a staple character for the Bretonians. There are some weaknesses to him, namely just how much he was costing in conjunction with being an ethereal unit. But now that he's always max efficiency, and much cheaper, he'll be a good source of terror at all times, while still being able to go dual SEs and occupy a lot of attention potentially. There are definitely drawbacks to having him, of course, but I do like this. This is a good step in the right direction for bringing some of these legendary heroes out onto the field on a more regular basis, because he's been missing for a while. He gets played in a handful of matchups, and that's about it. This might make it so that he can be brought in, you know, maybe not the majority, but still like a decent number of them, and do well for himself. Grail Knights got a splash attack knockback force multiplier, making them more disruptive and just hitting a little bit harder as they're running over units on initial contact. Max entities hit by splash attacks. They're trying to focus. There's a couple more changes like this. They're trying to focus down these elite cavalry units that have pretty low weapon strength. They want to make it so that their damage is more efficiently spread out. Because as it stands right now, oftentimes units like Grail Guardians, the reason that they underperform is that it's not that they don't do damage, it's that they don't kill enough entities. And what happens is they make initial contact, they breach into a unit, and they can get surrounded very quickly and overwhelmed by sheer numbers. And they're not killing enough of those entities to be able to fight their way out of positions that they get themselves into. So this might make it a little bit easier for them to escape while also maximizing their damage potential, which is going to be really nice. We'll have to see how much of an effect it has. They get the same splash attack force multiplier, which is fine. And Pegasus Knights, more mass changes. You can just see like all the way down the line. Very interesting that the regular Pegasus Knights have a much lower mass than the Royal Pegasus Knights. I'm not sure why that is, but, you know, lore reasons, I guess. Last notable change is Beast Slayers of Bastogne. They got a 50 cold cost increase. These guys are never used anyways. I don't agree with this. They should have been kept at the same price, I think, while still giving them all of these goodies. They get 2 more charge bonus, 6 to 8. Oh my god, devastating. They get 1 more base weapon damage, which is nothing. But the increase of 10 extra AP is actually a pretty big deal, because that is almost a, what is that? I mean, more than a 50% increase. I mean, it's not doubling it or anything, but it is going to make a big difference for these guys' viability, potentially. They might be a unit worth bringing. I don't know if they're going to need to cost $950, but, you know, maybe CA knows something that we don't. You know, there's still a Foot Squire, and Foot Squires are pretty poor in combat in general. I like the Bretonnian changes for the most part, but I don't know if it's going to be enough, honestly. Bretonnia tends to skew either really elite or just going for mass numbers of peasants with some Knights of the Realm to back it up. And none of these changes are, like, super pertinent to either playstyle, really. Other than the Grail Guardians and Grail Knights getting this minor buff. Again, we'll have to see in-game how it helps them out, but I don't imagine this is going to push Bretonnia into being even like a mid-tier faction. They're still probably going to be on the lower end of viability and dom. Doesn't mean they're not usable, of course. Any faction can come into a matchup and win it, but, you know, fundamentally they've still got a lot of weaknesses with their infantry just being so awful. Bull Centaur this is the biggest one. Like, Chaos Tower are going to be a nightmare now, I think. They got a ton of buffs. Starting off here, Bull Centaur Renders all got 50 gold reductions, even the ROR, and the ROR is incredibly powerful. Not like the biggest deal, obviously. You know, they're still going to be 1550 gold, which is quite expensive, but every little bit helps. Hobgoblin Wolf Raiders got a cost reduction. These guys were already one of the more cost-effective units in the game. I think a lot of this is centered around land battles, where the Chaos Dowie have like one play style, and that's it, which is train spam. But in domination mode, the Chaos Dowie were already fairly viable, and I think this is gonna... These changes alone, I think, just slight gold reductions on a lot of their core units and powerful mix-ups is already something that would make them maybe a tier stronger, but they also got hit point increases to their blunderbusses across the board. Chaos Dowie Warriors got 400 more HP, which is a 5% increase, which is pretty substantial still. Hobgoblin Cutthroats got more melee attack. I don't know why this is in here twice. When patch day rolls around tomorrow, we'll get in there and we'll take a little gander at any other odd things. Maybe they mean their melee defense is going up, or it's just, duplicated in here by somebody who copied and pasted a little too hastily. Hobgoblin Sneaky gets already fairly strong in some circumstances and matchups, but they got 5 more leadership, more melee attack, and they got an extra missile on their precursors. I think these guys might start seeing a lot more play just because of that. Like, my issue was that they had less leadership than Cutthroats. And Cutthroats were already a very low leadership unit at 45. Now they're also going to have that 45 leadership. And the Precursor Missile, 33% more ammunition as they're getting into combat and throwing in. And it's fairly powerful already. That was one of their big selling points, was that Precursor weapon. And it's just going to make them that much better. And they're already a bonus versus infantry unit, so getting 4 more melee attack and not having their bonus versus infantry touched is going to make them even more viable in those type of grindy melee-focused fights. Infernal Guard got HP buffs. Fireglaves got more HP. The Immortals did get 50 gold more expensive, but they got Unyielding Assault, which means that they cannot be debuffed on melee attack. And they got melee attack and melee defense buffs, which were pretty significant. 6 more melee attack and 10 more melee defense. The Immortals might be a nightmare unit for a lot of demon factions. Like, they're going to be able to get in and scrap, and just do an oodles amount of damage as they get into combat, because they do have an ability where they don't lose models until they drop below 75% HP. And previously that wasn't all that good, because they could take a lot of damage in melee combat, because their stats were solid already. But, they'd get debuffed, people would focus a lot of attention on them, and they would start dropping models pretty quickly. And lose a lot of HP. But with the increase to their melee defense, they might be able to hang in melee and value trade just a little bit better to win a lot more fights and maybe be more cost effective. Because this was always the problem with the Immortals, being 1,600 gold and being a little vulnerable still in melee combat. Now they might just be untouchable, kind of like the Wrathmongers are. It's going to be interesting. I think Chaos Tower are going to immediately shoot up to being one of the most powerful factions in domination mode with these changes, quite honestly. I mean, cost reductions across the board, HP buffs, melee attack buffs on their cheaper, crappier units, and they're just going to be able to swarm the field better than ever now. And they're not going to have to rely on their Fireglaves and artillery nearly as much, since their units are going to be able to hang in combat and value trade that much better now. Really nice to see. Kadai Destroyer got more charge bonus. Very worth it. Very deserved, honestly. The Kadai Destroyer is never going to be viable, probably. People who are specialists with the Chaos Tower can make this thing work, but your average player is not going to get a lot of use out of it. But maybe with the extra charge bonus, it'll help it out. We'll see. Its issue is never not being able to hit hard. It's really animations being kind of buggy that's the issue with this, and I didn't really see anything in the other sections that was addressing that. And Kadai Fireborn can't hide in forests. I mean, honestly, kind of makes sense. Like a giant demon made out of, glistening bronzed metal burning with demonic fire. I don't think that'd be a very stealthy unit to begin with, so fair enough. Knights of the Ebon Claw got terror added to them, so they might actually see a little bit of play since they're a terror-causing unit now. They'll be able to get in and route stuff if you get a good rear charge on them pretty quickly. They're fairly powerful in melee combat. It was just the fact that they had no utility beyond that that kept them from being brought on a regular basis. This might assist them in finding a niche on the Dark Elf roster. Raven Heralds got a mass increase since they fly in on Pegasus. Not that big of a deal for them. It's not like you use them in melee ever. They're a very specialist bow unit. just flying around and shooting those repeater crossbows and doing a ton of damage that way. And the mass is not going to help them that much. It's just a consistency thing more than anything else, I think. So that's just Harvester's got Fear, which is a small buff. I mean, it's whatever to the ROR. It's not that big of a deal. Not a whole lot to add here. I don't think this is going to make them a viable unit at all, but it's something. Leadership debuffs are nice, you know, and it's going to affect a lot of different factions. And maybe it gives them enough utility to use. I just don't quite see it. It's not like Terror. Like, Terror is just straight up amazing because it causes units to just run away in an inopportune time. Fear just maybe causes a rout a little bit earlier. But units that have Terror also have Fear. So, I don't know. You'll probably see Knights of the Ebon Claw more than the Slaanesha's Harvesters, who you never see anyways already. Pegasus changes. Blades of the Blood Queen got some more charge bonus and melee attack, which is nice. You'll probably never see them because they're still too expensive. Dark Elves just don't know how to support their elite infantry. Generally speaking, there's just not really a great place for them. Dark Elves are a very good kite faction, and they can scrap in melee, but usually you're just bringing lots of cheaper infantry to try and do that. I don't know how much this is going to help the Dark Elves have any kind of play with their more elite stuff. Cold Wind Chariot's got pretty big weapon strength buffs, as well as a little more melee attack and melee defense. Maybe they get used now? I don't see it. I mean, they're still one of the worst chariot units in the game. They're very slow, and their mass is pretty mid. They just aren't very good at pulling in and out of combat. I don't know how much more 3 melee defense is going to help them in that regard, but the armor-piercing weapon damage being increased from 32 to 46 is pretty significant, as well as a little bit more base weapon damage. Weapon strength buffs are usually one of the bigger benefits for a unit. Like, melee attack and melee defense are nice, but just the actual damage when you hit, especially on a unit like a chariot where it's a shock damage unit, is really where the money is at in my book. I'm going to have to test them. I still doubt that they're going to be that much better, but it's possible that this pushes them into territory where they become fringe viable in some matchups, where you really need a harder hitting chariot than Scourge Runners. That's the other reason why you don't see these guys a whole lot. Just one last little aside, is Scourge Runners are just better. You know, Golden Chariots don't have the same utility. But yeah, maybe they'll have a little bit of a niche now. More mounts, changes, again, just mass for Pegasus. Marathi, it's a little more mass. She's not that good in domination mode. You don't see her very often. Maybe you can play around with her just for funsies, but she needs a little bit more milk than this. She needs more HP. More than anything, I think that's what would make her Marathi viable. I think she's got like 5,000 or something right now, maybe even less. She's pretty squishy. Getting her up to about 56, 5,700 would be around the territory that I think she would be a lot better in. The Harganeth Executioner's got a similar buff to the Blades of the Blood Queen. Just more melee attack and charge bonus. Again, nice, probably not game-changing enough to bring these guys. Thunderbarge and Spirit of Grungni got armor reductions. Sure. I don't know how... It's not like... Thunderbarges are still scary. They're so damn expensive, it's hard to win with them. It's not like a Shredder of Lestria type situation where it's a unit that literally forces you off of a point. Because these things can't cap anything. And being an aerial unit, they're a little hard to protect at times, so this armor reduction isn't that big of a deal. for anybody, really. 80 is still respectable. It might make it so that Furies are a little bit better at killing Thunder Barges. Furies are already okay at doing so. The 10 extra armor is whatever. It's not making that big of a difference. Ekron's Miners and Miners with Blasting Charges get 4 armor-piercing explosive damage instead of 6 now. So, I mean, a 33% reduction is pretty painful. Don't want to see that as a Dowie main. And the base Blasting Charges got 25 gold more expensive. These units are really holding the Dowie together. Because they had a lot of uptrade potential. But they're going to lose a lot of that utility now. And especially since it's the AP damage, it means they're going to be chaff clear and not that good against anything else, really. So Dowie are not looking very good. They're starting to really fall apart here, especially with gyrocopters being 100 gold more expensive. Maybe people stop putting limits on the number of gyros you can bring, but they already were much worse since they could no longer fire on the move. Being up 800 gold now instead of 700 and 750, as well as being slower in the air, really sucks for the dwarves. Pretty significant nerfs to some of their most important units, being the gyrocopters and the miners. Thunder Barge is whatever. I mean, it's a nerf, but it's not that big of a deal. And it's not really a viable unit if you want to win. Like, it can get a ton of value, and it can be really fun to use, but if you're trying to win a game with the Dowie, you're not bringing the Thunder Barge anyways. Demigryph Knights all got splash attack changes. I think this is going to be really good. The Royal Altdorf Griffites were the only really viable one, because they caused terror and had glorious charge. Now that they spread their splash attack damage out more efficiently, they might actually they might all be viable now. Even the Lance variant that doesn't have anti-large, just by virtue of being able to hit and impact a unit and then pull out while actually having killed a number of models that can't be healed or regened. I like it. I like it. We'll see how it works. But it looks very promising just at the outset here. Pegasus Knight changes. Engineer's a little more expensive. Oh, they got cheaper on the mechanical mount. I didn't notice that, but okay, fair enough. Cool. More expensive on the Barded Warhorse, though. Master Engineer more expensive. Mechanical Steed, cost reduction. Big increase on the cost of the steam tank. 100 gold is a pretty significant sign that CA wants to limit this unit from just dominating a meta, you know. I don't know if it's going to be like... It's not a huge cost increase considering it was already a significant investment, but 100 extra gold for a faction like Empire, where you got lots of cheap units that you're trying to cram into your builds. That 100 gold could be the difference between bringing like a handgun or having to bring a crossbowman, which can very significantly affect the versatility of your builds. Boris Todbringer, more mass. Balthazar Gelt, more mass. Just all the goodies. More mass across the board. We got thicker Pegasus, boys. They gave him those growth hormones. Get him nice and sauced up. Grand Cathay got some baffling changes. I'm going to be honest. Cathay is in a pretty weird spot. They're good in the hands of people who spend all their time playing them, but, you know, that's very few numbers in terms of the actual people who play them. And the Astromancer got a leadership debuff from 70 to 60, which is absolutely ridiculous. That is huge. And this was already this was a really expensive character. And 10 leadership being lost here. I just can't help but feeling like this is just going to nerf this guy into the ground. Like, what's the point of bringing him now? He got more mass in exchange. 1,300 to 2,000. I mean, 2,000 mass is like a really solid point to be in. as a single entity, this is about where you want to be as the minimum, like, viable range at which a single entity can push out of a unit without too much help. That's going to be good, but I don't know, dude. I don't know about this leadership nerf. I don't think this was fair at all. I mean, this guy's like 2,500 gold on the damn Moonbird. Unwarranted nerf. IMO. Jade Lion lost cap power. This just goes to show how little they get played. I had no idea they had full cap weight as a single entity. Now they're down to every other SC at 3. They got more armor and a little bit more weapon strength. That's nice. Same with the Jet Lion. Pretty much identical now. You know, and like the armor and everything. They just have a little bit different abilities and they provide different harmonies. I don't know how much... I mean, the armor is awesome. 70 to 90 is an exponential increase. Armor gets better the more you have, and the small incremental increases on the higher end make even more of a difference. So, like, a unit going from 15 to 30, for example, would be good, but not that big of a deal. But going from 70 to 90 is pretty awesome. That's a pretty significant buff to their resistance to base weapon damage. Like almost 30 or 40% even. I'll have to check the armor tables, and I would advise anybody watching this to go check out the armor tables themselves, because it gives you it's very clear cut and straightforward how it works. And if you I think there's links to it on Turin's Discord. Look in there and see if you can find it, and raise that game knowledge, because you'll see it very plain language. Just how important something like that can be. But I don't know if this is going to make them a mainstay. They're probably going to be, like, very situational still. Longman's got more mass, which is huge because they sucked at getting out of fights, and they have very low HP totals, so maybe now they can impact into units and be able to pull away without suffering horrendously for it. Again, Astromancer with a leadership decrease. Ouch. I think what they're trying to do with the Astromancer change is they don't want Cathay to just be bringing tons of SEs that raise the spell mastery and just spam spelling their way to victory. I think they're trying to limit that here, is what the intention is. I don't think it's really all that big of a deal, because like I said, Cathay is really hard to play. This isn't really going to be doing them any favors. The new unit is really nice and really impactful and will make a big difference for them. I just don't get the point with the Astromancer stuff. Terracotta Sentinel got more charge bonus, a little bit more weapon strength. Nice, not going to make these that much stronger. Going to be very hard to make use of them still. Same with the Green Guardian. The ROR got some more stuff. The Dune Dragons got more spell resistance, which is nice. 20% to 35%, bring him in line with most spell-resistant units. It's going to make him pretty hard to deal with if you're using damage spells. 35% is a really nice point at which you're mitigating a lot of the really, really dangerous magic to a reasonable degree to keep these guys in combat longer. They're a pretty significant investment, so having something to protect that investment's really nice. Gorbad got more expensive by 100 gold. Pretty big nerf to him. A Savage Orc Great Shaman got a 150 gold reduction on the cost on the Warboar. So going to be a really cheap option to run around and Wumbo Jumbo Chant and cast all those cool spells. Might be a fringe viable lord now. Gorbad you'll still see a lot. 100 gold, you know, that's a 10% increase considering he's 1,000 gold at base. But he is fairly cheap already. And you're bringing him for his abilities more than anything. It's not great for the greenskins, but this isn't ruinous for Gorbad's viability. T-Frabas, oh yeah, and the Great Shaman on the Wyvern is 100 gold cheaper. You probably won't see him on the Wyvern. Wyverns are kind of terrible. T-Frobber's got a buff. T-Frobbers kind of suck. Shots per volley down to 1. Calibration distance increase. They're going to be more accurate, and they're going to do more damage. A lot less spread. I just don't think that you'll ever see them still. Excuse me. Like, their missiles aren't that dangerous to begin with. They've got very low mass and pretty low HP. If they get caught by something in combat, they just die anyways. None of this is helping them out in that regard. They'll just be a little bit better at staying at range and doing a little bit more damage with increase to their AP and base missile damage, but they're not that impactful. Same with the regular Goblin Wolf Chariot. Again, I don't think it's going to make a big difference for him. A Ragnarok Queen is 100 gold cheaper. Big whoop. Arachnaroks are not a very good unit. They need more changes. They need more melee defense. I think you could probably compound this by another 100, and then you'd be talking about something worth bringing in. They don't need a ton. They just need a little bit, and this is not enough of it. Shadow Walkers, High Elves, getting some reasonable changes. Nothing too wild, but Shadow Walkers getting a big hit point increase. We're talking about 700 HP on a missile unit that's supposed to be a hybrid type of unit. They get 5 more melee defense, which is pretty significant. These might be much better now. Rangers got more charge bonus and 2 more melee attack. Nothing wild, but that's a good step in the right direction. Rangers were already one of the stronger options for the High Elves as a melee infantry unit. It's going to make them that little bit better. That can make all the difference for a faction that, you know, a lot of people talk about the High Elves like they're the worst faction in domination mode. I really don't think that they are. They're just hard to use. Like, they're squishy as hell. They lack a lot of AP. And the changes here are actually addressing some of the squishiness in a positive way. Like, just more HP. Rangers are just going to be more damaging. But Dragon Princes and the Fireborn and Silver Helms all getting 10 more armor is nice. Lore Masters get more armor and leadership and missile block chance up to 30%. Phoenix Guard, Sword Masters also getting buffs to their armor and missile block chance. So these elite units getting a lot more, a lot comfier with being heavily armored. Like I said, at the upper end of the armor, like scaling, an increase from 100 to 110 is a much bigger deal than when it's on the lower end of the spectrum, like from 10 to 20. So this is a much bigger change than it might appear at first glance. Like, just across the board, more armor on High Elf units is awesome. And again, the Silver Helms and Dragon Princes will be a lot more maneuverable. So we might see a lot more kite play from the High Elves. That is what they're very good at already. And I think these changes might make them just a little bit better at it in a very positive way. Finally, you get to Khorne, my boys. Knights of the Brazen Throne got more mass, which is awesome, since they've got Murderous Charge, which gives them serious mass increase while they're on the charge. They're going to be, what's their mass going to be when they actually make contact? 2,700, I think, which is pretty ridiculous, and they've just rolled units over, and they're going to be more efficient at killing models. Big change. Don't know how much better it's going to make this unit overall, necessarily. There's still a lot of drawbacks to using them, but I think it's going to help their, I think it'll help their performance by a fair amount, especially just with the fact that you're killing more entities consistently. Since Khorne doesn't have a way to mitigate healing, really, these guys might be good into factions where you think you're going to run into a bunch of elite infantry backed up by a healer. And these guys will be able to just cycle charge them into oblivion, potentially. Going to be a fun thing to play around with. Corngors, same nerf that the Beastman Corngors got. It's the same unit, so nothing to talk about there. Nothing to add. Just a good balance. Corngors were, a lot of people, when they first came out, were saying they were overpowered, but, I mean, once you learned how to work around them, I mean, they've got 60 armor, which is pretty squishy to missile fire of any type, really. They also are pretty low mass, so they just get flattened by really high mass units. And lowering their damage output just a little bit is going to make them in a little bit of a better place at 725 gold, which I think is very reasonable. So, I like it. I don't like factions that force you into bringing just, like, overwhelming numbers of one particular unit. In that vein, we get another change that I am very appreciative of. Wrathmongers lose 10 armor, which is unfortunate. They're going to be a little squishier to chaff. Not that much more, though. But still a fair amount of nerf. Splash attack knockback force goes down pretty significantly. So they're not going to just run into units and just send stuff flying and be nearly as disruptive. It's not that big of a deal for them, because it's not like they were a cavalry unit just bowling through everything. They lose a little mass, so they're a little less good at trapping stuff, but it's only 50. Like, it is, like a 10% reduction on their mass, but they'll still be able to trap stuff pretty well. Charge speed increased, run speed went down. Pretty reasonable. 46 run speed is, like, about as fast as a foot unit can get. I think 40 is a much more reasonable number. They're not going to just be hounding stuff to the ends of the earth anymore. Slaughter Brute got some cool buffs. I could have sworn it already caused terror, but maybe not. Added attribute causes fear, and it gets Frenzy. Frenzy is a big deal, because it had good melee attack. But, 10 more melee defense, or 10 more melee attack from Frenzy is no joke. And it's just going to hit really hard, and it's unbreakable, as you may know, as long as your Lord is alive. So this might make the Slaughter Brute fringe viable in a couple matchups. I don't really know if it is. It's good, but not great on the buff end of things. Blood Crushers, this is one of the bigger changes. This max entities hit going from 4 to 2. These guys were even worse than Skull Crushers. Like, Skull Crushers were already hitting 3 targets with their attacks, and with their low weapon strength, it meant they were distributing damage very poorly. These guys were hitting 4 on a regular basis, which was just horrible for them. I mean, they were not killing a damn thing, and they were reliant on Hellblade for an increase to their weapon strength, which is like one of their big selling point passives. Made them very bad. These Blood Crushers have been a pretty poor unit for a long time now, but being more efficient in dealing their damage, huge. They're actually going to get Hellblade up quick, and then they can go on a tear and maybe trade up and get 1,500 gold value back. And their splash attack knockback is going up almost double. A little bit more than double, in fact. I don't know what I'm talking about. 0.4 to 1, they're going to be very disruptive colliding with units. They're going to send stuff flying, and they're going to be mulching on what's in front of them. Skull Crushers got the same change as the Knights of the Brazen Throne. They didn't get more mass, but they got the splash attack reduction, which is the bigger deal for them. Excuse me. Soul Grinder got more weapon strength. Quite a bit more. 35 on the AP end, 15 on the base weapon damage. Soul Grinders I low-key enjoy, and I think they're pretty decent in some matchups. And yeah, it's going to make them better at dealing with SEs, which ironically was probably where they were weakest. So now they can do a little bit more damage to those scary monsters that might be trying to run them down. Still not going to see them a ton, just because, they're a little hard to use and maximize. But I enjoy them. I might be mixing them in a little bit more regularly again. Skull Cannon got a minimum range, thank goodness. Skull Cannons are still going to be good. It was a little silly seeing them sitting in melee combat and them just like shooting the unit literally on top of them. You can probably still shoot out of units to units that are next to you, which is fine, I think, but, you know, just appreciated that maybe these missile units will be a little bit more reasonable now. Hellforge Bellowers, I thought that they should just change the way the Hellforge Bellowers work, but they decided to just nerf the range into the ground and the calibration distance. But, you know, I mean, like, the calibration distance goes hand in hand with the range. 280 down to 160. It's going to make it way more targetable by spells. The issue with the Hellforge Bellowers, it was so strong, and you could sit a million miles away, and because it's a Gaze of Nagash or Magic Missile type of effect, it was just hyper accurate. It would just lay waste to your army before you could get anywhere near it. But now that it's a much shorter range unit, it's going to be way more important to have good micro on this thing. And at 160, that's well within the distance that a lord like Azazel or somebody else can run in and either rampage or cast spirit leeches on this thing, and it'll still be really powerful. It might just not be nearly as abusive and oppressive as it once was, just by changing the effective range. I would love to be able to use this thing. I think the Hellforge Bellowers is a really important unit for Khorne in a couple matchups, particularly against Tzeentch, where you can use it to counterfire stuff like Changebringers and Flyers. And it's been a little sad not being able to use this because it's always banned in tournaments. So hopefully this is enough. I still think CA should think about removing the vortex damage on its individual missiles and just make it so that it's just a magic missile firing piece. Because then it would be fairly well balanced just on that basis alone. But we shall see. We shall see. And Heralds of Khorne's Fury getting the splash attack change. We'll see how viable it makes these guys. I love the Heralds of Khorne's Fury. There's a couple matchups where they are pretty strong. I'm just hoping that these changes make them that little bit better so that they're more usable on a regular basis. Kislev, losing some armor on the Frostworms from 110 to 100, pretty significant nerf. And they get a little more expensive. Not the cost's not that big of a deal, but the armor is. I mean, that's going to make them a little bit squishier, and they're already they're fairly tanky still, but any little bit of extra squish to a unit that's fairly expensive, especially when you're tying up the cost of your lord and the mount together. So gonna make for an interesting change. We might see some more Lord variants, with Boris being cheaper. 100 gold, less expensive across the board. Nice, but I don't know, man. Boris is hard to use. Combat Lords, just pure Combat Lords, outside of, you know, like Khorne, obviously, and a couple of other factions generally tend to be kind of bad. And I just don't know if this is enough for Boris Ursus to be viable. Maybe he should get another use on Shardblade. I think that would be a good addition, but maybe this gets him into territory of usability. Boyar's a little bit less expensive. You never see Boyars either. Like, Boyars and Boris Ursus are pretty indistinguishable from one another in a lot of ways. It is what it is, I guess. And 2 melee attack on armored Kossars with great weapons. That's nice. Like, these guys couldn't hit anything, hardly. Because you'd bring them against, like, Chaos Warriors, and they just don't hit because their melee attack is too low. An extra 2 isn't breaking anything, but it might help their damage output just enough to make them a little bit stronger. Here is the Lizardmen. Lizardmen got big buffs across the board, actually. No nerfs to Dread Saurians or anything. I think, you know, Shredder of Lustria is still going to be their best monster, but all of their other stuff got a little bit better. Maybe people start playing around with it more, which is my hope. I hope these buffs are enough to just get people to branch out and not over rely on one particular single entity. So the Pakopok cohort, these guys have been pretty bad as an ROR for a long time. Like, the only thing they had was Vanguard deployment and better stats. Like, that's not that big of a deal. Like, who cared? You know, for 300 more gold than a standard one, no thank you. But Devastating Flanker being added is unreal. These guys are going to flatten stuff if they get a flank off. It's going to be so nice. Very nice change. Definitely going to be worth 1,300 gold now, with the potential to uptrade for days. Going to be a very scary unit. Skink Oracle got 400 more HP. Chameleon Stalkers got 4 more melee attack, which is fairly significant for them. They're a very defensive unit, and the Precursor Missile is really where their best of their damage output comes from, but they can be a really obnoxious, sticky unit, and them getting a little bit more damage output might make them a little bit more of a regular occurrence in games. And not just to go snipe artillery pieces, but maybe even to disrupt backlines and shred through missile units. Geltblom's Terror got some more HP, just like 400 HP across the board on a lot of the mounts and monsters. Sor Scarvet got 4 more melee attack on the Carnosaur. That's fine. I mean, I'm kind of excited for Krokgar to get 400 more health on his on Grimlock. You know, the Carnosaurs are a fun unit. You don't see them too much, but they're almost there. I think the HP might be enough. Fimir Balefin got a little more melee attack. Very well deserved. I mean, his melee attack is horrendous. 3 more is a worthy addition to him. Skinwolf Werekins are already kind of crazy. They got Striders, so they're a little bit crazier now. Very scared to see these guys running around out into the forest to chase down stuff. Marauder Icewolf Chariots. I thought these were already fine, but they got even more buffs. This is going to be a terrifying unit to run into now. I genuinely think this might be and become one of the strongest units that Norska has access to. They've got a missile attack, which is, you know, a missile attack that does a little bit of damage. It can add to their viability in its own right, but now they have, like, double the armor-piercing damage on the chariot itself, with more base weapon strength, 4 more melee defense, 2 more melee attack, and this is where you get terrifying levels of mass. Chariots with 2,000 mass are the sweet spot. Like Razor Gore chariots and, God, what are some of the other ones? Gorebeast chariots, situationally, they're not nearly as good. Really, it's the Razor Gore chariots that have 2,000 mass and are just an absolute nightmare trying to stop. Marauder Icewolf chariots being in that same category. Not in terms of the AP that they have, but just in the amount of mass that's available to them. I think these things are just going to flatten front lines from now on. And this might make Norska, like, a top-tier faction. They're already incredibly powerful in Dom. A lot of people think that their win rate's kind of inflated by top-level players. I think that's true to a degree, but I just don't think people play Norska a lot, because, you know, I mean, they haven't been touched since Warhammer 1. They just are, like, there, you know? They get forgotten about oftentimes. Like, their campaign sucks, so people don't come from, like, campaign to multiplayer wanting to go, oh, I'm playing Norska. They want to play something else, usually. I enjoy Norska. Maybe Norska's my third faction, now that I'm thinking about it. I need to play him a little bit more. And the Miststalker's got a cost reduction, which is nice. Very cool. Love it. They're 15. They went from 15 to 1450. Like I said, like 50 gold, not that big of a deal, but every little bit helps. And I mean, I think these were the only viable Fimir warriors to begin with. I think that's going to make them just a little bit easier to get into your builds now. Angels of Decay, I think this is just their melee attacks. 4-3 on the weapon strength spread for their splash attacks. Nice change, more efficient. Gonna do a little bit better model entity killing. Pestigores with the reduction to charge bonus, nothing crazy, just 2. Plague Ogre's got a big buff. Like, more melee attack for this anti-infantry variant. Lot more melee defense. 42 to 47, charge bonus going up. No wall breaker, though, but who cares? That's a campaign thing. Multiplayer, no big deal. Even in single player, it's really not that big of a deal either. Like, whatever. You know, they want to, like, they need to rework Sieges to begin with. Just, like, the way it works right now is just janky, period. Melee attack up by 3 on the great weapons. 5 more melee defense. These are going to be obscenely tanky great weapons now. Like, 47 melee defense on a great weapon unit is actually kind of gross, because these guys have a huge bonus versus large. And they're just going to sit in combat and just feast on anything that comes into their radius. Charge bonus up to 54 also. Bile Troll's contact effect changed from poison to acid vomit. I have no idea what this is. I need to find out. But I didn't see any info in the rest of the patch notes about that, to be honest. So we'll find out together tomorrow, I guess. Entities for Plague Drones and more Death's Heads units being reduced. Nurgle on the Nurgle Herald on the Rotfly from 5 to 4. Probably just put it from 5 to 3. But, I mean, he does have more weapon strength on his Rotfly. So, I guess it's not that big of a deal. He's not going to get picked regardless, but maybe if you play around with him, you might be a little better. Great Unclean One's got a little more weapon strength. I mean, not really where they were struggling. They're just big and awkward and slow and don't have a whole lot to offer. If your opponent's not going to engage them, which they really shouldn't. So, this is a very meaningless buff, IMO. Rotfly changes. Alright, now we get down to the really important stuff. Ogre Kingdoms were just grossly overpowered this last patch. I mean, absolutely stupid. Like, I don't know what CA was thinking with what they released them in. Like, the state they released in was just abysmal. There was no reason for them to be so obnoxiously overpowered. Especially these units here that I'm highlighting now. I mean, it was beyond silly. So, Pigback Riders. Leadership from 55 to 45. Charge bonus down to 26. This is the big one. Like, the Pigback Riders having full cap weight was obnoxious. It made spamming these guys so easy for the ogres to just overwhelm the battlefield with not just numbers, but durable units. Because Pigback Riders at 55 leadership, they get more leadership from Uncanny Coordination. They get 12 leadership. They were better than Empire Infantry. It made no sense. They lost a little bonus versus large as well. They don't have the same cap power. They're a lot squishier on the leadership. Don't hit as hard on the charge. Piggyback Knights got a leadership debuff. Less leadership. Less charge bonus. Less cap weight. Less BVL. Maybe they'll be balanced. They still don't fall over, as far as I know, in melee combat, which is a little goofy, but hopefully this leadership change and the cap power is enough to get them into an area where they don't need to be banned in every tournament, because nobody in the multiplayer community wants to have to ban stuff from their tournaments. We want to play with the stuff that you give us, CA, so just please make it reasonable so that we can actually do so. Thunder Tusk got a lot less ammo on secondary missile weapon. I think what they mean by that is the Howdah characters. They have 2 anti-large missile attacks outside of their anti-infantry missile that the Thunder Tusk itself shoots, which was dumb. I don't know what they were doing with that. but maybe this means that they're a lot less good. And it says here, damage output of the Thunder Tusk Riders has been significantly reduced. I would like to know by how much. Please tell us. We'll just have to figure it out, I guess. Hopefully the Thunder Tusk doesn't have to be banned. It's a cool monster. We want to use it. We just don't want it to single-handedly define the meta for the Ogre Kingdoms like it was in conjunction with the Pigback Knights. Like in the early days of last go-around when Omens came out, it was just a bazillion Pigback Riders and 2 Thunder Tusks. And the Ogre Kingdoms literally could not lose unless they fumbled the bag in a generational way. It was horrible. It was horrible. Nobody was having fun except for the Ogre Kingdoms players. And then when all of this stuff got banned, they were having a really awful time, and that sucks. Like, nobody wants to ruin other people's enjoyment of the game because the units that are put into their faction are grossly overpowered. Scrag got Vanguard deployment. This is the buff we were looking for on Scrag. This is definitely going to change everything about him, right? Okay. I don't even have words. There's, like, no jokes to make about it, other than to be just wildly and meanly sarcastic about it. Stonehorn, with the Harpoon Launcher, 2,000 instead of 2,100. Whatever. You're probably not going to see it too much, still. Teethbreaker's got magical attacks. That's pretty cool. Vaguely viable unit. Honestly, going to fill a nice niche now. They'll shred Furies. They'll kill any Demon Flyer. Especially since Skavener's so good at Howling Warp Gale. At using Howling Warp Gale on stuff. Just locking it down. Teethbreaker's going to be able to punish a little bit harder on those Demon factions. Which is really where Skaven struggle the most. Demon faction's kind of hard counter Skaven right now. I don't think this is going to stop that, but it's a nice little addition, for sure. And it sets the Teethbreakers apart a little more. Previously, it was just that they fired faster and a little more accurate, but now they've really got something that sets them apart. More flavorful stuff is always a big boon in my book. Slaanesh. Slaanesh, the other mega unbalanced faction. And I don't see them being balanced here, really. Nothing is changing. 100 gold increase on Heartseekers and Seekers is fine, but really, Seekers, I mean, did they change the way they pile into combat? Because if they didn't, they're still going to be massively unbalanced, and they're going to be really OP still, even if they're 1,000 gold. I don't think this is enough, but we're gonna have to test it. I'll hold my tongue until then. I'm just saying, I'm a little worried. All of the chariots got more armor, which I think is really fair. I mean, these Seeker chariots, I mean, they're just so damn squishy. I would love to see Slaanesh play around with their chariots more. Maybe they will now. I got 30 more armor on every single variant of the Seeker chariots. Exalted and Standard, so maybe? Maybe. Casket of Souls, 50 gold cheaper. Can't hide in forests. Whatever. You don't see them often. They're okay. Like, really wide factions with lots of infantry aren't gonna love facing a casket, but that's about it. And Tomb Kings are already pretty good at chaff clear anyways. They don't really need this thing to begin with. It'd be nice to see maybe a little bit something more flavorful as an effect that they can add to this. Khalida got immune to contact effects. That's nice. She's still not going to be brought very often, but for those of you who are Khalida enjoyers, you got a little something at least, right? Better than nothing. Kotep is 100 gold cheaper on the Chariot. Cetra got more acceleration and deceleration on Chariot of the Gods. The Chariot of the Gods stinks. I don't know if this acceleration and deceleration is going to be enough to make it good. But it will help a little bit for sure. Like, this is a very important hidden stat for chariots and mobile units in general. Just like how quick they start and stop. It's just a maneuverability thing. Like, if you have a fast unit, you want it to be able to respond to your orders in time and not have to stop and start so much in such a herky-jerk manner, which is why the chariot is so bad. So maybe it helps it some. 100 gold increase on the War Sphinxes, at least on Cetra's War Sphinx in the standard variant. I don't think that's going to balance them. Probably still going to need to ban double War Sphinx up to a certain point. We'll see how 100 gold works as a nerf to them. The Centigores with the 50 gold increase, Zangors less charge bonus. Herald got some more armor. That's cute. It will make them a little bit more survivable, but that's not that big of a deal. Again, armor on the low end here, not making a huge difference. And Exalted Pink's got 5 more armor. Fine. It's okay. Their Phys Res is where their survivability is anyways. An extra 5 armor is maybe 1 base damage difference on a regular basis against other archer units. Just because it's raising up the percent chance that they block that damage. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, it's such a minuscule change, it's going to be hard to notice that in-game, honestly. Aranessa, cheaper, by 50 gold. She was good in some matchups, just for the nets. And 50 gold is 50 gold. Big mass change for Terrorgeists. From 2,000 to 3,500 on Luther Harkin. And this applies to the Vampire counts, Terrorgeists too. As you can see down here. Luther is not going to get trapped on the ground nearly as much. And he'll be able to push around real good. In which you really need him to, because he's stupidly expensive. So, Terrorgeists are not bad. They typically struggle as a non-mount variant. Just because they lack the utility without the magic caster on them. But it applying to both is nice, and it's a little bit of something. Bloated Corpses got 25 gold cheaper, okay. Fine. They got Expendable added to them, whatever. But the fact that they no longer count against the single entity unit cap is the biggest deal. Because you couldn't bring them in Rotting Leviathans, and that was really dumb. Or Terrorgeists, so thank you, CA. Maybe people will bring a Bloated Corpse in their build just to YOLO it and see if they can get value on it. I mean, theoretically, these things could get you, like, 1,000 gold per use if you get them onto, like, a blobbed-up position or on an elite unit. They're still going to be hellishly squishy, though, so I doubt this makes a huge difference for them, but it's potentially nice. Dame Knight's Aaron got the melee attack, and their charge bonus went from 54 to 55. I don't know why they had more charge bonus than standard Knight's Aaron, but that's kind of interesting. You learn something every day. Now they're just the exact same. Mass on the Terrorgeist is up. Strigoi Vampire Lords are already really meta. They're probably the strongest Lord pound for pound that the Vampire counts have, I would say. If you just want a combat character and something that can snipe other Lords and still provide some healing utility, Strigoi were your go-to, and they're even better now. And they're less likely to get trapped on the ground, so they're going to be even more nightmarish to go up against. But that's fair. Vampire counts are very reliant on their Lords. It kind of sucked watching Strigois get surrounded by something really cheap like Feral Cold Ones or high mass like Hound units, and then they couldn't get away. It's very, very cheesy. So maybe this helps them out and keeps them from just getting hounded to death by cheaper units, and then fighting them with larger SCs is a little bit more important. Blood Knights got some more damage. They were okay. They were fine as it stood. They weren't the most meta unit on the Vampire Counts roster, but a little bit extra weapon strength never hurt anybody in terms of combat performance. You know, it's only going to benefit them and help them overall. So an already decent unit got a little bit more decenter. Gorse got another cost reduction. Still probably never going to see him, but he's cute and funny, and he's got some fun spells and abilities. And being a Mortis Engine Corpse card's kind of funny. So, maybe you see him, maybe you don't, because he's still a corpse card. And it's impossible to get him anywhere. Black Knights with a 50 gold reduction, and the Lances also 50 gold, and Varix Reavers are 100 gold less. Now, Varix Reavers, I've been seeing a few Vampire Counts players using them much more regularly, and they hit pretty hard with their charge bonus, so 100 gold cheaper for a regenerating cavalry unit is pretty nice. Might see them a little bit more. And the Black Coach got acceleration and deceleration, which is cool. It's going to help them at getting around the battlefield, which is pretty much the only thing that they're supposed to do to begin with. Warriors of Chaos. Charge bonus increase on all their chariots. Or just Chaos Chariots of Slaanesh, actually. Okay. I don't know why I read this as just Chaos Chariots, but that's nice. You know, the Devastating Flanker is still the selling point of the Slaanesh Chariots, but having higher amounts at base is going to help both their front charges, of course, but also give them that exponential increase when they do get side and rear charges onto stuff. Marauder Horsemen of Nurgle got cheaper. Is this applying to Nurgle as well? Because it's kind of funky that these are here, and then there's like no mention of it in their actual faction, but maybe just because Nurgle didn't get that many changes, maybe it's just down here for reasons. I don't know what it means. It'd be really weird if these were 650 on the Warriors of Chaos roster and 675 on the Nurgle roster. It wouldn't really make sense, but here we are. Trying to figure it out based on patch notes. Multiplayer cost for Chaos Warriors and Nurgle, 825 to 800. That's something. Chaos, or not Chaos, Forsaken of Slaanesh. 22 to 36 charge bonus. Forsaken of Slaanesh were really crappy. They sucked. Like, they had Devastating Flanker, and they just had way less charge bonus than other Forsaken variants. And now they're a little bit more in line with the other variants, while still having Devastating Flanker. Maybe you see them on occasion, and they're not just a meme unit. Bilious Thunderguff got a whole 100 gold off of it. That's nice. Viable, probably no still. It's a giant. You know, giants are something you can bring with some very specific strategies to make them work, but it's pretty difficult to get value out of them. Now, here's a big change. Kolek Suneater went from 75 leadership to 85. He is going to be hard as hell to break. Like, one of my only complaints with Kolek is that against really, really big SEs, like Nakari, or, you know, like a similarly costly combat lord that also had, like, access to magic that could debuff Kolek, he would be fighting fine, but he would break on his leadership way too early in my book for somebody who's supposed to be he's a freaking god of the mountains, of the Chaos Wastes. Made no sense why he was so flimsy leadership-wise, but now he's much more usable, probably. I think this is the final change to Kolek that we've been waiting for. So, Kolek enjoyers rejoice. Might be able to use him and not feel sad when he just runs away for no reason. Dragon Ogres. Got a 50 gold cost reduction. It's something. It's nice. It's not that big of a deal, but, you know, 50 gold is 50 gold. I can't emphasize it enough. You know, cost reductions are really nice. Cost increases feels bad. Sylvan Knight's got 50 gold, cheaper, very, very situational unit. And I got one more melee defense. Still going to be really situational. Zote's got 50 gold off. Still going to be situational. Enigma's, the ROR variant, 50 gold. Still situational. Now here's something though. Wardens of Sithril, the ROR, Wildwood Rangers. 4 more melee attack. Enabled magic attacks. So maybe these guys are going to be a hardcore, heavy-hitting unit against demons. And they got expert charge defense. Ignore this. I mean, this is superfluous to the consideration that they got expert charge defense. Because this includes defense against large and infantry. Considering they have a silver shield and good melee attack with magic attacks and expert charge defense and a bonus versus large, this might be a really annoying melee unit to deal with that the Wood Elves have access to. Because they'll be able to fight damn near everything. And that's pretty cool. I think that I've said it before. Let me start over. I've said it before. I hate anti-everything units. The only things that can feasibly be justifiable as being good against large and small targets and have anti-everything properties is infantry, because they can't catch everything. Like, that's why Seekers got banned, and why Seekers, I think, are still going to be really ridiculous. Like, it's just the fact that they're able to surround something and rip it apart, and they have 100 speed. Nothing can escape from them. That's my biggest gripe. That's why big mobile units should not be anti-everything, and they need to be very specialized. Infantry units, though, since they're slow and they have to anchor on a point and have people come to them to grind value, I think you can very feasibly give buffs like this without breaking the units. It's cool. It's cool. They're gonna be pretty strong, I think. Especially if you give them some heals or just some other little defensive buffs with spell casting. I like it. Ash Storm got a big reduction on the WOM cost. From 8 to 10. That's pretty meaty. And the upgraded from 14 to 12. No other spell changes, really. Army abilities, no changes. I really would love to see some army ability changes. I think that, although I swore that there were some here, right? Oh my god. So they say no army ability changes, and then, yeah, here's Meat Feast, which is an army ability down here. 27 to 20 seconds, big nerf to the heal potential on that Tier 3 Ogre army ability, which is really nice. That was another one of the things that had Ogres, like, buffoonishly overpowered. I don't know why it's in unit abilities, but whatever. That's just a really minor gripe. Enchanted Ballistics. Effect range, 35 to 55. 55 needs to be the standard for effect range. 35 is minuscule. I think it was balanced around smaller unit sizes than we have now. Because Ultra unit size just makes it harder to get stuff into radiuses feasibly. And 55, I think, should be the standard. And I think they should even look at buffing some radiuses up to 75 meters. And I really don't think it would be that big of a deal. That's my 2 cents. We'll see, though. Nobody's bringing gunnery lights still, anyways. Like, it's a cool ability, Enchanted Ballistics, but is it really going to make that big of a difference? No, I don't think so. Mistwalker's Barrage. This is Eltharion's AoE. Fully reverted to its patch 5.0 glory. If you were around for that, it was amazing. Eltharion was suddenly viable. He could run into enemy units and actually do damage with his barrage for the first time ever. And CA saw that, and they said, that's stupid. And then they nerfed it again, and then he was useless again. And it was sad days for Eltharion enjoyers, because Eltharion's so cool. He's in one of the coolest trailers the game has ever had. The Warden and the Paunch is a top tier trailer, and then you play around with Eltharion in multiplayer, and you're just disappointed. Like, he's a campaign lord, and that's it. Now, with Mistwalker Barrage being reverted back to being useful, maybe he comes back with a vengeance. Because he's cool. He's got good lore of magic. On his big griffin, he's very costly, but very effective. Especially with his barrage doing what it's supposed to. Throt got a big buff. Throt's Remoldered having 2 uses really hindered his utility. Because you would really just want a Packmaster, which had a passive smaller heal, but one that was obviously passive and active the entire game. But now he got one more use on Remoldered, and it's a 12% heal. So he can feasibly bring a unit like Gorich and healing cap him almost, which is awesome. I think we'll see more Throt. Throt was in a pretty decent spot already. And, you know, buffing up these really powerful abilities, I don't think CA should be scared of it. Like, Dom mode, the way it plays out, like, limited use abilities don't break the game, really. They're very powerful when they're available, but when you're out, then they're gone, you know? Like, there's nothing to worry about for the vast majority of the game. And having them have, like, 3 uses, I think is a really good spot for the majority of them. And I would love for them to look at a lot of the other army, or not army, but, like, unit abilities that have, like, 1 or 2 uses at most. And get them up to a more reasonable number where it's actually worth bringing some of these abilities or items, especially potions, that nobody uses because they're useless, having 1 or 2 uses. You know, Remoldered was always useful, but now it's even better. And that's just wonderful. I love it. Primeval Roar no longer has an initial recharge time, which is so nice because that means the ROR Troglodon can run in and get that buff immediately rolling, which is great, because previously Troglodons are not that good at melee combat. They're fairly squishy also. They got mediocre armor and defensive stats. Plus, they're a ranged unit, so if you're sending them into melee to recharge this melee ability, and they get killed before they can use it, what was the point of having it to begin with? Really nice change. This is going to make it so that unit can maybe not snowball and just steamroll over people, but give an actual reason to send it into melee early instead of just to try and charge a fringe ability. Now it can actually do the thing with the thing that it had to begin with, you know? Thank you. Thank you, CA, for making a common sense change. Fury of the Flawing Blade, added effects, more weapon strength. I believe this is Wanbo, which is cool. Wanbo is decent. I don't see a lot of Cathay players use him, but there's not a lot of Cathay players, period. But I have seen a few say that Wanbo is actually fairly strong, and this might give him a little bit more utility. Unless this is something else. Is this one of the abilities on the, War Drums? It might be. But regardless, I mean, anything getting added effects, maybe whatever unit or person has this, I'm pretty sure it's Wanbo, will be able to make some more use out of it. Moonflare got a little more damage. That's the AoE for the Astromancer and the Moonbird. It's something. It's nice. It's okay. I still think that debuffing the leadership on Moonbirds was dumb. Terrible idea. You can't even heal them as Grand Cathay outside of Mao Ying. So it's not like they were really even oppressive to begin with. I'm still confused. Epidemic Outburst. I don't know what this is. Is this an Epidemius ability? I've never seen this get used, but it got more damage. Wow. Cool. Hawker's Precision got base missile damage increased. Alright. That's nice. But this is only on Way Watchers, right? And they're mostly AP. So I'm not 100% sold on that buff. That's mid. From the Mist got 5 more % missile resistance, which is the baseline ability on all Famir. So now they've got just straight up 50% missile resistance. Because they have 25% innately, and From the Mist gave another 20%, as long as their leadership is above 50%. So the extra 5% getting them up to 50 is nice. Maybe a little bit better at just running around and distracting. I still think the Miststalkers are the only usable Famir Warrior unit. But anything from my boys. I love Famir. Thematically, one of my favorite units. I just love, like, Chaos Corrupted Swamp Folk. It's a very cool idea and aesthetic appearance. Item abilities, Bloodforged Armor. This is, oh my god. What's his name? Grimgore. Yeah, Grimgore's armor gives more vortex damage and radius up to 15. Size of the vortex at the end of its duration. I don't know exactly how it works. You don't see Grimgore get used. You don't really bring items on him either outside of your next. So, this is whatever. Fang Sword of Eltharion got a added effect of base weapon strength up by 25%, which is nice. Another buff to Eltharion, man, and he's mostly base weapon strength on his horse and on foot, so maybe a buff to health to health to horse Eltharion. Fistful of Laurels, no idea what this is. We're gonna just move on. Sword of Torgald got AP. Oh wow, AP weapon strength. Wait, what? They've got this backwards, because previously, the way this worked, it didn't give 90% armor-piercing weapon strength. It gave 90% base weapon strength. So they've got this flipped around. Now, instead of giving 90% base weapon strength like it did previously, it gives 50% base weapon and 50% AP, which is awesome. Thank you. Sword of Torgald was one of the absolute worst items in the game. Did nothing for Wulfric, and now he gets magical attacks. So, Demon Hunter Wulfric? Question mark? That's nice. I like it. We'll see how it helps him out. You know, Wulfric's there. He's meta because he's one of 3 options for your lord, so why not give him something that he can have a little more fun with. Thrall got a buff to his abilities, so I appreciate them looking at Norska for something at least. And Gitsnik got some base weapon strength as an added effect. It already gave the AP, so the base weapon strength is nice too. They're just like, I can see that all of these weapon strength items, it seems like they're trying to get them into a very, like, consolidated and, what's the word? I forget the word. Some fancy word that's escaping my brain right now. They're just getting them to be a lot more in line with one another. Like, Deathbringer does 50%, 50%. Now Gitsnik is 50%, 50%. Sort of Torgal does the same thing now. They just want those weapon strength buffs to be very in tune and, like, recognizable across the board as just being, the same effect, basically, with, like, just different timers on how long they are in place. So that's all the changes. Every last little thing. I think it's pretty good for the most part. There's still a few things I would have liked to have seen. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about it more. I just would like to see... I just hope Seekers actually got some more substantive changes than just a cost increase, because cost was not an issue. I mean, they're still going to be massively up trading on a regular basis for 1,000 gold, which is what I'm worried about, and it's not going to fundamentally affect what made them so oppressive, you know? But most of the other units that were grossly overpowered look like they've been brought to heel, like the Thunder Tusk and the Hellforge Bellower especially. We just have these few units. Slash is just poorly balanced in general. Like, as a faction, they've either been bad or they've been impossible to deal with for pretty much the entire time they've been in the game. And the changes here are really not making me think that's going to be any different this patch. It's the only thing that I'm really worried about. But yeah, other than that, Chaos Dowie got some very needed buffs. It's going to make them a lot more accessible to the average player, because they were fine, but really only in the hands of very high-level players or specialists. Just giving more hit points to everything and a little bit of a buff to their Hobgoblin units is going to mean that people who aren't, like, mega sweaty and just are, like, hyper-focused on value trading at range can actually come in and play with some of the melee units and actually do something. You know? And the blunderbusses got a little better. Chaos Dowie blunderbusses have never been bad in terms of their damage output, but they're so squishy. And honestly, I think 300 HP is a nice little hedge to where the models are that little bit extra resistant to damage and just dying outright, so that they might just be viable now to bring. You know, instead of just seeing Fireglaves and some Dowie warriors and a train and then like 1 or 2 Bull Centaur renders every game with the Wolf Raider Cav. You'll see more of everything, I think, now. You'll actually see Hobgoblins after this patch, I think. And them actually be kind of threatening, which I think is awesome. It's gonna be... It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood for Hashut. Mr. Hashut's neighborhood. They might just take over the meta, in fact. I mean, they got the most substantial buffs, so... We'll see. Could they be the next Dark Lords? And I'm excited to see Taurox in action. You know? I'm going to be playing him at some point. Promise you. But anyways. We'll worry about that when the time comes around. Till then, I'm signing off. And I'm just slapping all this up on the YouTubes now. So, let me know if there's anything I missed. Let me know what you think. And I'll see y'all tomorrow for the actual patch day, where we'll get to experience it all personally, and either rage about it, or commend it. And we can all live in a utopia of perfectly balanced multiplayer fun and shenanigans. So, deuces, guys. And take care. Peace.